welcome back, everyone. We're back with another live debate, TruStory live debate. And today we have Zaki Manian and Ben, and we're going to debate whether atoms are a shitcoin. And before we get into that, I kind of want to talk about why this is an important topic. Personally, I'm a huge fangirl of Cosmos. I've known the Cosmos team for almost 2 years now, and I think they are doing something really special in the crypto space. And unlike most other crypto projects I've seen, they've really thought through the technicals a lot. And in fact, I like them so much that we're actually building TruStory on Cosmos. But one of the things I've noticed is every time I talk about Cosmos or brag about Cosmos, I have a bunch of investors who come up to me and say like, okay, that's great, but how do atoms ever become valuable in the long run? And I got kind of sick of answering that question. So I was like, Zaki, let's do a debate about this because I want to clarify to people whether atoms will accrue value in the long run. And it's a fair question to ask because obviously you saw in 2018 that over 200 coins completely failed. And so investors are very cautious of what they want to invest in going into 2019 and 2020. And so they're thinking about atoms and whether atoms are a good investment. So obviously value accrual becomes an important question in that context. And right now, the market cap of Cosmos is 700 million. And so it's almost $1 billion, and it's one of the top 20 coins, I believe, on CoinMarketCap. So obviously there's a lot at stake, and investors who are investing in that valuation want to know whether it's going to keep that valuation or go down to zero, like some of the other altcoins. So the purpose of this conversation is to talk about why Zaki believes they won't go to zero, and why Ben is a little bit of a skeptic and thinks they might. And so let's just get started. Before we jump into that, I kind of want to give people a little bit of a context. And so Zaki, can you explain what atoms are and what purpose they even serve in the Cosmos network today?
Do you want to do intros first?
Sure. I didn't even go to the intros, but yeah.
Okay, let's do intros first. Ben, why don't you go first?
Great. I'm Ben Weintraub. I'm the founder and co-CIO of Southside Digital Capital. We're a registered investment advisor that focuses on crypto and blockchain. Specifically, we work really closely with different crypto projects to design their token economic structure. And our main offering that we're planning on rolling out over the next couple months is we have a custom and full service treasury management services for crypto projects. So the new Cosmos and the new crypto projects that are going to start hopefully in the near future that have learned, well, maybe we should be managing all of our funds ourselves. We hope to work really closely with them in order to provide a real foundation for future growth for those projects. So that's the 30-second version of who I am and what we do.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Zaki?
Zaki Manian, head of research at Tendermint. I am the first contributor to the Cosmos project after Jay and Ethan created it started. I was the first person who said yes to the idea that atoms should exist if we could pull all of this off. So I think I'm a well-qualified person to explain the idea that honestly, Cosmos is has so many different layers to it. It's sort of exciting that we've actually gotten to the point where we can have a actual conversation about whether or not what atoms are now.
Awesome. Well, super excited. Well, that's a good tangent to what I was getting into earlier, which is atoms. So there's this thing called Cosmos Network, and you're fundamentally building a interoperability solution and a platform to build blockchains. And there's something called the Cosmos Hub, and the Cosmos Hub has a token attached to it. So can you give the audience a quick intro to what atoms are and what purpose they serve in the Cosmos network?
So here's what atoms are. Okay. So in March of 2019, after almost 3 years of work on the Cosmos software, we launched the first sort of BFT network that was run by strangers over the internet. So 67 different entities all over the world started a network that they all call the Cosmos Hub. And and they chose to adopt the distribution of its native token based on the fundraiser that was used to fund all of the development of the Cosmos software. So atoms came into existence in this network. And this network basically has a set of core features. One feature is it is running Tendermint. It is running Tendermint in a decentralized setting, which was really the first time that it had ever happened. The Tendermint consensus engine. It has staking and slashing and delegation, so it has a bunch of economic relationships. It has an inflation system that distributes value in the native token around, and it has governance features. And the initial set of governance features were signaling proposals by which people who had staked in the network could delegate funds or could vote on whether or not they endorse or reject a proposal. It's been quite active. We've had, I think we're on the 13th proposal at this point. And then this network also was that is essentially what atoms were. And there is a real difference between what atoms are today and what they are intended to be in the future. And I'm probably going to get into a lot more detail as to what atoms are intended to do and whether or not I think they will ever fulfill that goal, and then whether or not if they fulfill that goal, they will have value.
Got it. So you said what atoms do today versus what they are intended to do in the long run are different. So if I'm an atom holder, what can I do with atoms today?
You can stake them. You can buy and sell them on exchanges. A bunch of exchanges decided to connect to this network that got started and offer buying and selling atoms.
So speculation. One is speculation.
So speculation.
Yeah.
You can stake these atoms, and you can pick which validator you stake to, which sort of assigns proportional voting power to that staked atom to different validators. And you can vote in governance once you've staked. So one atom, one vote, roughly, is basically the model, and you can participate in the signaling process. You can also make proposals with atoms, and that's about it.
So it's basically speculation, staking, or signaling.
Yes.
Okay, the 3 S's. And so, Ben, knowing that, can you give a little bit of context of where you come into the Cosmos network? Like, what do you know about it, and what do you think about it so far?
Absolutely. So my starting point for this discussion is I'm a big fan of Cosmos. I think that Cosmos is going to result in a lot of value accrual to the crypto ecosystem in the long run. And I think that the interoperability protocol that you guys are building out is definitely a step in the right direction for where our industry and our asset class needs to head. With that said, today we're here to debate whether value is going to accrue to the Atom token, and specifically, just for clarification purposes, whether the USD price of one Atom today is going to go up or down in the future in the long run. And so when we talk about...
No, we should denominate in BTC.
So I mean, I'm happy to do that. I think that makes it a little easier for me at this point. But with that said, we'll
I'm playing on hard mode, man.
Fair enough. So even if we just stick to the slightly more simple metric of USD price of the Atom token, I'm not of the belief that there's no way under any circumstances that value cannot accrue to the Atom token. Certainly not. A lot of things could happen that could lead to that to be the case. And furthermore, I'm not here to argue that in the short term, over the next year or two, we won't see a significant increase in the price of atoms. Instead, though, when we think about the long-term value drivers of any currency or any asset, what it really comes down to is the supply schedule of that asset and the demand for that asset. And when we look at atoms specifically, on the supply side, things are generally understood where we have either anywhere from 7% to 20% annual inflation, which is a high level of inflation.
Yep.
But with that said, just because you have a high level of inflation, that doesn't mean it's impossible for value to accrue to the token. All that means is that demand, and specifically the growth of demand for the token, needs to outpace the growth of the supply. So with that said, I think that the vast majority of our debate today is really going to center around, given that we know what the supply is more or less, what are the main drivers of long-term demand for the Atom token? So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Zaki, and ask you, what are your main drivers of demand in the long term? Why would people want to buy Atoms?
Sure. Okay, so as I was saying, and this is probably the first time that we've, so most of our conversations for a long time were like, what is proof of stake? Like, how does proof of stake work? Will proof of stake work? And I would have expected when we started working on this project that we would have had like a 1 or a 2 year period of time before market even was ready to accept proof of stake as a thing. And the fact that we have seen so much engagement with the proof of stake system on Cosmos, just mind blowing. And then usually I also have a lot of conversations about IBC, what IBC is, what the inter-blockchain communication protocol is. And while the inter-blockchain communication protocol is a big value driver is a big part of the value proposition of Atoms. I'm not going to go into sort of what it is. I'm just going to like assume that like it lets you sort of move things from one blockchain to another. Those things could be anything from tokens to like a validator set. You just sort of assume for the purposes of this discussion that it works. We are finishing the 1.0 spec for IBC this week, so that will be exciting. And if people are interested, lots of places to touch base on what IBC is. Okay, so here is the core sort of thesis about Atoms. In a world where there are many BFT, fast finality, high throughput blockchains that will exist, we produced a framework for building one, Cosmos SDK. But lots of others are coming to existence, and largely this is the world that we imagined. And in a world where the IBC protocol is widely adopted and all of these chains are interoperating with each other, which I think is a must, then what is the Atom intended to do? What the Atom is intended to do is facilitate, like coming from where we are right now, which is like, the universe is tiny, the cosmos is small, it has to expand, it has to learn how to be. What the Atom is supposed to be is the security token that anchors the strongest and most credible blockchain in the most credible blockchain in the cosmos. And what do we mean by credibility? What credibility means is that the rules of the system will be relentlessly enforced. And because what we are building in Cosmos is a world that assumes that many of our blockchains will change the rules in arbitrary ways in the Cosmos at unexpected times. Irregular state transitions like the DAO hard fork are something that we are sort of accounting for and expecting. And so what people will want to do is to hold their wealth in this IBC network and anchor it in the security of this super credible blockchain that they know will enforce the rules that it has promised to enforce. And if the Atom holder population can produce this super credible thing, the desire of people to host, to rely on that credibility as a mechanism, but to protect their wealth and their transactions and their assets, will provide Atom holders with the ability to extract or derive rent/value from this process.
So Ben, before you counter his point, so Zaki, just to summarize, Cosmos Network basically is building for a world where there's many blockchains, and so you have a protocol and an SDK that allows people to build all these blockchains. The IBC connects all these blockchains together. But you believe that in this mix of blockchains, there's going to be one core blockchain, which is called the Cosmos Hub, right?
Yep.
And the atoms, you're saying that the atoms are responsible for securing the network of the Cosmos Hub. And so and then Ben's question was, where does the demand come from? And you seem to suggest that the demand comes from the fact that there needs to be some central hub that the people can trust in these many blockchains. So the demand will come from there.
So there will be I believe there will be conflict. There will be tension between something like the Binance DEX, which is a Cosmos chain, which is run by a tightly controlled, centralized set of validators that are, that are all different arms of Binance, versus this decentralized thing with the Cosmos Hub. And people might say, oh, I really trust the Binance chain. I'm willing to hold lots of assets on the Binance chain. I'm willing to hold a lot of wealth on the Binance chain. And maybe that'll be good enough for them. But if the Atom experiment is successful, the credibility of the Atom holder community, the Cosmos Hub validator set, as people who are able to both protect from external attack, but also not use their influence to undermine the rules of the system. Like, I thought it was really important in our system that we had the first slashing incident, and like nobody was like, oh, we should revert state. Oh, we should like give these people back their money. Like, it was like, these are the rules, we're going to enforce them.
So you think it's the first decentralized hub?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I just want to clarify, Zaki, before we move on. You said that a lot of people may be interested in holding atoms because they want to put their wealth in atoms.
No, what I was trying to say is let's say I want to do, let's say there are a bunch of valuable services on the Cosmos Hub. There's decentralized exchanges, there's decentralized leverage and loan making, sort of like you see in DeFi. So sort of to zoom out a little bit of the thesis of Cosmos is right now, smart contract platforms, Ethereum, offer two things. They offer security, the security of the network, an incredibly difficult to fault state transition machine in a BFT in a network, and they also offer interoperability. So if you're on Ethereum, you can interoperate with all kinds of things. Cosmos is about separating those two things. So security will come from the native staking token of whatever blockchain is running, and interoperability will be provided by IBC. So in that world, you have this network. The network has all kinds of services. And it's like, I want to hold Bitcoin, but I want to hold Bitcoin, but I want to access all of these like DeFi, open finance capabilities that are available in the hub to like get sort of the most value creation out of my Bitcoin, or like in the Cosmos network. But on the other hand, I'm real worried that if I store my Bitcoin in a Cosmos blockchain that like could be corrupted or could be evil or is willing to change the rules on an arbitrary basis, they'll steal my Bitcoin. So what do I want to do? I'm going to hold my Bitcoin on the Cosmos Hub, because holding it with the Atom holders as the collateral and that community as the guarantors of the rules gives me an incredible amount of confidence that like my Bitcoin will be my Bitcoin.
Gotcha. So I just want to make sure I understand your perspective properly, which is that the Atom holders are the ones that are basically staking on the Cosmos Hub. And as we all know, any blockchain needs a set of validators in order to reach consensus and validate the transactions that are happening on that chain. And specifically with Cosmos's architecture, the way you have it set up is basically you can have an infinite number of chains that all link to other chains. And so ultimately, and I'm just still summarizing here, the Cosmos Hub is meant to be one of those center chains that a bunch of other blockchains are building off of. And instead of running their own validator set that may not be decentralized or maybe costly for them to start up, they just want to plug in and get the same security and validation from the Cosmos Hub that anyone else using the Cosmos Hub can have. And therefore, like my understanding is that you're saying that the people that want to hold atoms are the people that want to stake in the Cosmos Hub. Is that correct?
Like earn all those fees on all of those assets that people choose to like
exactly. So
compute over, like run programs on top of the hub secured network.
So ultimately, I think what we can agree on is that the real driver of value that you're talking about here, and the reason that people would want to hold atoms, is because there's an expectation that the transaction fees that are being paid out to the Cosmos Hub are going to be significant in the future, right?
So two things that I would like clarify is, because the atom holder network is a distributed collateralized custodian, the expected drivers of value are both transaction fees, which are sort of proportional to like supply versus demand of transactions, but also just sort of assets under management. If you think about custodian businesses, traditional custodians like will charge a fee on top of assets under management. That's like a very traditional business model. If the atom experiment is successful, which at this point we have no idea, or like we have some idea because they exist finally, but we've been making progress, but like this is still a long way from the full vision being realized. If this is successful, atom holders will then be able to hopefully, in a competitive market, obviously, extract value just on the sheer assets that are originated, listed, held inside of this atom secure network.
And that's interesting. So with regards to, so we have one value proposition, which is the right to collect your pro rata share of all fees being paid to the hub.
Yep.
You also have the governance aspect of like what coins to whitelist to pay fees. But now, interestingly, you're saying in addition to that, and we'll address that first value proposition in a second, there's a second value proposition, which is, let's say there are $1 trillion hosted in the Cosmos Hub. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. How would I, as an atom holder that is staking in the Cosmos Hub, how would I be able to extract value if someone else is holding their Bitcoin that I can't touch or manipulate or trade or do anything with? How would I be able to extract value unless I'm charging a fee? But my understanding is that the Cosmos Hub only charges fees for transacting. It doesn't charge fees for just hosting. Is that correct?
So all aspects of Cosmos Hub economics are subject to governance. So this is the other sort of cool, like sort of key thing that we are trying to experiment with, which is sort of one of the things that's nice or exciting / interesting about the Cosmos network is that we really went for this whole like each blockchain is its own decentralized autonomous organization kind of model, and then the next and we've gone down this path. So so there is no social contract except for the current set of atom holders decide what the rules will be in the future. So that's the only social contract.
No, you're saying the answer is no now, but that could change in the future.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like the current social contract. So the second thing is, because currently the Cosmos Hub doesn't custody anything. Like it custodies itself.
Yeah.
What we're working on and imagining and dreaming and like was the original conceptual model of all of this was, you can imagine that, like, for instance, there will be a Bitcoin peg zone, and the Bitcoin peg zone, a bunch of validators will hold Bitcoin on behalf of users, creating, synthetic Cosmos Bitcoin. Those Cosmos Bitcoins will migrate over the Cosmos Hub. If the validators misbehave, they'll be slashable in atoms. And then you get this, it's very conceivable, imaginable within, and like possible within the way the Cosmos software is designed, that every time someone either enters or exits, or every 3 months, some fraction of a percent of all of the Bitcoin of the the Bitcoin that is in the peg zone just gets transferred to atom holders.
And why would that happen?
It would happen because you've got to pay people to do work.
Yeah.
And credibility is what we anticipate is going to be this in a world where there are thousands, tens of thousands of blockchains. credibility will be the scarce resource.
That's a very interesting thesis, and I think it relates directly to the question of, well, ultimately, if we stick to the first value proposition that you suggested, because I think the second one of like the AUM growing over time, that's kind of contingent on the first, that the Cosmos Hub is going to be able to be that central point where all transactions that are happening in the hub, in the Cosmos ecosystem as a whole, are really all being routed through the hub, right?
Yep.
And so just before I start to kind of make my counterpoints, I just want to understand, you say that credibility is really going to be the most important factor. And so when it comes down to it, you're of the belief that almost everyone is going to err on the side of validating through the most secure and the most trustworthy hub, the Cosmos Hub, as opposed to any other options that they have because of that security and credibility.
Yeah, I think I think we've seen this in the conventional economy. Institutions like the Federal Reserve have become incredibly valuable to the economy, primarily because of their credibility. And the Cosmos Hub is really the first experiment in whether or not a group of multicultural, semi-anonymous strangers over the internet can build a credible institution together. And if they succeed, I believe that credible institution will accrue enormous value.
Yes. So ultimately, I think you're not wrong about almost anything that you've said so far, and I can agree that there's going to be a lot of different demand for the most secure and the most trustworthy validator network. And if Cosmos Hub can do that, there may be some demand for transacting through the Cosmos Hub. Even if that's the case, though, I'm still ultimately not convinced that value will accrue to the atom. And the main reason for this is, when you look at the way you guys have gone about building the entire ecosystem, one thing is abundantly clear. It's that you want to give people the choice on who is going to validate. Do they want to set up their own set of validators? Do they want to have someone else validate for them? Do they want to change parts of the consensus algorithm? Do they want to do this? Do they want to do that? And you're allowing basically the most flexibility and what I'm going to call the most free market forces to exist within the Cosmos ecosystem, so that ultimately, if there is a real value proposition here, the goal is for value to accrue there. But when I think the fault comes from the fact that anyone can spin up a competitive validator network. And so, when I'm not just talking about, we're going to spin up, Ben Weintraub's Southside Digital Capital Validator Network, and we're going to be just as good as the Cosmos Hub, everybody. I think that is unrealistic. And there's absolutely a way that the hub can differentiate itself as the most that it has at stake and the best validators. But ultimately, due to the nature of the way you've built your ecosystem, I think when it comes down to it, there is a finite amount of transactions per second that the hub can approve. And so as the Cosmos ecosystem expands, I think over time, we're going to see, even if that TPS continues to increase over time, because of the nature of proof of stake, where you do need to choose the number of validators, there's always going to be a trade-off between the number of validators and the TPS. At some point, you really do reach a limit of the transactions per second that can be approved by the hub. And so the question becomes, once you reach that critical mass where there is so much demand for the hub, one of two things is going to happen, or maybe both will happen. One is that people say, okay, we really need to get our transactions through and approved by the hub right now, and we're going to pay a premium. And therefore, basically, the price to get your transactions approved through the hub are going to go up and up and up over time. And I would agree, in a vacuum, that would certainly sound pretty good if I'm an Atom holder. Oh my God, people are paying all these fees now. There's a lot of competition to run through the hub. But ultimately, because of that free market nature of your ecosystem, in those situations, I think the people that are not willing to pay really high transaction fees because maybe they don't have the highest priority transaction for speed, or maybe they're not transacting in an immense amount of value And even if it gets approved, in a couple of minutes or in an hour or so, because they put a low transaction fee, I think ultimately, due to the free market economy we're trying to build here, a lot of people are going to elect, instead of using the Cosmos Hub, I want to go use a different validator set that is going to be cheaper, maybe a little bit less secure. They still do have 200 globally distributed validators. Sure, there isn't as much money at stake, but I really am only trading, $100, or I'm paying for my coffee. And so when I think ultimately the way I see this playing out is every time you hit that capacity and you see and you start to see an increase in the transaction fees per transaction paid, as soon as it becomes economically viable for someone to spin up a competing validator set that it's going to try to take away some of that market share from you, I think it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy where as the fees go up, it becomes more profitable for someone to launch a competing network. And therefore, as you said, you can launch thousands of different blockchains and thousands of different validator networks. And so over time, I see two things happening. I see the total TPS supported by various Cosmo hubs basically scaling to infinity, so that like anytime you want to have a transaction done, you can choose which validator set you want to transact through. And you can say, okay, this is a really important transaction. I am going to pay a higher fee and I want to go through the hub. Or I may say, yeah, this is a crappy transaction. I don't really care when it gets there. And even if, God forbid, something happens, it's really not the end of the world. I'm going to go through a slightly less reputable validator set. So ultimately, through no fault of your own, Zaki, because, I think this is really like the right way to build this type of ecosystem, just the natural competition that is going to exist as a result of these market dynamics, I think makes it really difficult to see a future where like everyone really has to transact through the Cosmos Hub and only the Cosmos Hub. And for that reason, like I really want to hold atoms because all the transactions are running through the hub.
Interesting. Yeah. So basically, to summarize, you're saying because of the way Cosmos network is structured and the free markets at play, it cannot form a monopoly in the network.
I just think it's ripe for competition. You're exactly right.
Okay, cool. Zaki, what do you say to that?
So I completely agree with this. So my thesis is basically it will be if like I think the hat trick of pulling off a credible, decentralized validator set community that like is sufficiently difficult to replicate that the barriers to competition are not zero. But I also think that the Cosmos architecture and system would not fulfill my dreams and my vision if there were not a substantial number of competing hubs. Because if the Cosmos hub became a monopoly, like atom holders would be like the de facto rulers of the world. Like, and this is not a desired outcome. Like, we're not trying to just shuffle the deck chairs on like who are the masters of the world. We're trying to create a world that is better than the current world. And the current world is dominated by like a small number of super wealthy people who have all of the power. And so it's a sort of core tenet of the design of the system of Cosmos, of any system that we would build, that there is a competitive marketplace for validation. There is a competitive marketplace for credibility. It gives rise to a significant degree of censorship resistance, and like the opportunity to exit, for value to exit if the atom holders make terrible decisions. So I think all of this stuff is really important, and I hope to God that the Cosmos Hub isn't a monopoly.
So you think even though it can't become a monopoly, you think it can still remain credible enough to accrue enough value in the long run?
Yeah, what I would say is, it is. I would say so. Like in terms of prior art, on the prior art of like what atoms are, probably in my mind, the only things that are really kind of similar and preceded it are, one is Decred, and which is a notion of a self-governing sovereign chain. and then later Tezos, which also has this self-governing sovereign. I don't actually truly understand the mission of Decred very much, but I do feel like Tezos was architected and designed to someday be a monopoly on security. And because the Cosmos Hub was not, I think it we have sort of like we have the social consensus, which is really the only important part of the whole system, has kind of like a little bit of a head start on trying to compete in this, it's a jungle. There are going to be lots of competitors, but we are the first people who we're the first social consensus that fully appreciates the competitive environment that we're in. And so that gives us a little bit of an advantage competing with the other animals.
So Ben, are you convinced that with the free markets and stuff like that, it can at least accrue some value, or do you think it'll go to zero in the long run?
Yeah, so I'm not going to argue that it's going to go to zero by any means. With that said, though, I think if we go back to kind of the beginning of our discussion, where we said in order for in order for Atom tokens to accrue value in the long run, the demand, as dictated by basically the anticipated future fees to be paid out. So the discounted cash flow anticipation of future fees in the network, the growth in the expected demand has to exceed the growth in the supply schedule. So already today, we know that the Cosmos Hub doesn't really facilitate that many transactions. Ethermint, for example, has about 200 TPS. I was reading as part of my prep for this debate, and I'm not going to be able to cite exactly who it was, that basically at its current price, you're pricing in roughly 40,000 transactions per second in the Cosmos Hub at the current average transaction fee paid. So if you're betting that ultimately in the long run value is going to accrue to the Atom, you're basically anticipating that the 40,000 TPS is going to grow more than, or the expectation of 40,000 TPS, the expectation is going to grow more than the supply schedule. So this goes back to, in the short term, over the next year or two, could the speculative nature of these assets and people saying, oh, look they just rolled out the IBC, it's awesome. I think all these transactions are going to come through here. If that expectation grows really quickly over the next year or two, faster than the current 7% inflation rate, absolutely the price of atoms could go up in the short term. But when we talk about, basically, and Zaki agreed, when you have an efficient and competitive market for validation, and you can basically have an infinite supply of transactions here, because, if it makes sense from a cost benefit perspective to roll out your own validator set that's globally distributed. If you've got the capital, Zaki said, well, the barrier to entry isn't zero. It's just, you need to be able to spin up your own, you need to use an SDK and be able to interoperate or use that.
Other people to believe in it.
Absolutely. But that ultimately comes down to the argument that atoms, if there are value in atoms and they're staked in the network, there's an actual monetary incentive not to be a bad actor. And so ultimately, the only barrier to entry that exists for me to now go up and try to spin up my own network is capital. If I have $1 billion of capital today, I can distribute it to 50 different parties or 200 different parties, and I can say, go spin up your own validator node. We're not going to talk ever again other than on chain. Here's your money. Go take care of that. At that point, what's to say that validator set isn't at least, I'm not saying it's better than the Cosmos Hub, but what's to say it's at least not competitive with the hub? So ultimately, I agree there is a barrier to entry. You need capital, but with the exception of capital, and this again goes to the fact that if we have an efficient and competitive market, as soon as there is even an inkling of demand for a different validator set that's going to either be able to validate for cheaper or faster for whatever reason, I think once the math makes sense, we're going to see that spin up. And so when you have that level of competition, it's hard for me to understand where the high levels of fees are going to come from through the hub. Because even if, there is some premium to be paid to the hub, they're still capped at a limited number of transactions per second. So it's either going to come down to all of the transactions are paying crazy high fees because there are billions and billions of A++ priority transactions that all need this. Or what I think is more likely is we're going to see a very wide spectrum of demand for different types of validator sets with different trade-offs. So it's not to say this is going to go to zero, and it's not to say that the Cosmos Hub can't become one of the preeminent validator sets in the Cosmos network, and I think it's well on its way to becoming that. But purely when you introduce the concept of a free market, open competition, and really low barriers to entry, all you need is capital. I think it's hard to imagine a world where people are like, oh my God, I have to get this transaction through the hub. I have to do
it. So let me walk through like a little bit of that, and mostly like it's cool. I think our understanding is fairly aligned, which is great. So sort of core things that I view. So if you kind of look at like metrics upon which like Cosmos is moving right now. So right now it's in the before IBC days. It's really difficult for any blockchain to really in the Cosmos network to really host much in terms of asset under management beyond what its sort of native token is. So like the majority of Cosmos network assets under management is right now the Atom token, BNB, and Terra's Luna token. Like native tokens, most of the value. What I think will be, and that number is, $5-ish billion right now, which is cool, which is like way ahead of what I was expecting. But progress. But the core metric to ask about whether or not, and for anyone to choose that they want to participate in this Atom communities is to, as we get into early next year, as the IBC network starts to emerge, is what is the relative assets under management of different parts of the network? How much of the network is secured by atoms? How much is secured by other tokens? How much is secured by just raw institutional credibility, Binance or whatever else, the Libra consortium, whatever. All of these things will exist in competition with the hub, and it is an interesting experiment whether or not the hub and Atom holders will actually be able to like compete in this market, be able to offer services and value and value that will continue to attract transactions and continue to attract assets in a competitive market. I do think that like one of the things that's cool about Cosmos is that we I think most other blockchains are conceived as like entire universes unto themselves. Like this blockchain will be the only blockchain. Once you have your money on this blockchain, you'll never be able to leave. Cosmos trying to like internalizes its own competition to the Atom into this like super system, and we'll see what happens.
Ben, what do you have to say to that?
So, I think we did a good job at the beginning of saying that the AUM value accrual thesis is kind of built on the first part, that there's going to be significant assets held in the Cosmos Hub. And so ultimately, that is an interesting concept. But when I think about it, if I hold my BTC on the Bitcoin blockchain, I'm not paying any fees. I can hold it infinitely and I'm not paying any fees.
Yep.
Absolutely. If I want to use, the interoperability blockchain, if I want to use the IBC, ultimately, would I be willing to pay a fee to move that Bitcoin amongst blockchains? Absolutely. That may make sense. But as soon as you introduce the concept that in order to just use the IBC once, and now I'm on a different chain that is managed by the Cosmos Hub or a different validator set, now I have to pay a tax that accrues daily or monthly or just every second. I think that's a very different question. So when you introduce the concept of interoperability, that's great. And there's a cost with any transaction fees on the blockchain. We all accept that. But now when you get into the notion of we're going to charge a tax for just basically custodying your assets here, it remains to be seen whether people are going to be willing to pay those taxes. I think that in practice, there are definitely going to be certain cases where I definitely got to keep my Bitcoin, operated by.
Especially if you can earn interest on lending it.
Yes. That is, and so there are certain cases where I'm willing to give basically a certain piece of my margin to the hub for hosting it, so that I can access all this stuff. Absolutely. But
I mean, that's a good way of putting it. If the hub is successful, there has to be margin on the assets that's being held. There has to be value accrual across the entire asset base. There must be margin for the Atom holders to take a percentage of. If there isn't any, the whole thing falls apart.
I would tend to agree with that, but I think that's generally based on the fact that the reason people would want to use the Cosmos Hub or the IBC is to capture value in some capacity. So obviously, if there's no value capture, there's no margin to pay people with. But under the assumption that, yeah, people are using Cosmos because it is creating value for them in whatever capacity, I don't think it's impossible to see that, oh, yeah, people would be willing to pay a certain tax. But again, I think this goes back to an efficient and competitive market. What is the true percentage that you're going to be able to charge, right? It's not 2% a year. We know it's not 2% a year. So is it 0.5%? Is it 2 basis points? Is it less than that? I think it remains to be seen. And especially when, this goes back to the very open nature of the Cosmos ecosystem, whether I'm hosting it on the hub or I'm hosting it on a crappy validator set, as long as I trust those crappy validators, then they're not charging me a tax. Like, there's no real cost to me here. So what this goes back to, again, I think there's going to be a very wide spectrum of demand for really safe and secure hosting and transaction verification. But I think there's also going to be a lot of demand for really less safe and secure transactions. So this is a very interesting concept when you think about like the peg zones, because specifically, like I think you're correct that like Bitcoin and Ethereum, those peg zones are most likely going to be linked to the hub because it's the safest and most secure. But this goes back to, if I know as soon as I send my stuff to the hub, I'm basically paying a tax every day. It's just a factor that's going to factor into people's decision to use the hub or other validator sets. So again, I think this breaks down to, we have part one where you really do need a critical mass. And part two is then, yeah, maybe you will be able to capture that critical mass. I think the part one is still where I'm unconvinced. Again, if Cosmos really is able to become that central hub that everything is running through, and there is some sort of monopoly or moat around that status, then absolutely, now it seems like an interesting thing. We can start to charge a daily fee, and it'll be a microscopic fee, but yeah, because people want our security. But in practice, when you have a free and competitive market, I think that in practice, all of those fees ultimately go to zero relative to your cost to validate.
Cool.
Yeah, I think
that's like a credible way of thinking about that. But the flip side of it is like, as you were saying, the Cosmos architecture has unlimited TPS as a whole. And we actually can move essentially all of the world's liquid assets onto Cosmos blockchains. So, it's like, what amount of fee capture on 40 or 50 trillion dollars of aggregate value is enough to make Atoms?
And I can agree, if we get to 40 or 50 trillion dollars hosted on the hub, I will be wrong, and I will happily admit that.
Well, that's the plan.
The plan for Zaki is to take over the world.
No, it's to decentralize the world, so it can't be taken over anymore.
Fair enough.
But the plan is to move $40 trillion onto Cosmos blockchains.
So I think where the crux of the argument is, fundamentally, Ben, you think that value, sure, like if Cosmos Hub can do a good enough job accumulating enough demand, then sure, they can accrue value. But because of the free competitive market and the nature of the Cosmos network, you think it's gonna be hard for them to get that demand, because anyone could come in at any time as soon as it's profitable to launch their own validator set. Right?
I think generally that's a good summary.
Yeah.
Just so that I'm making sure that I'm being accurate with my position. I think the key is the demand, like today for Atoms, is pricing in an incredibly high level of TPS already.
Yeah.
And so I'm not just talking about, the actual transaction fees on Cosmos are going to increase. I think that's duh. like it's basically at zero now. And I do agree with Zaki, like it's going somewhere. So that's going to increase. The question is it going to increase? Is it going to catch up to what's already priced in today, which is about 40,000 transactions per second? And then is the growth in the expected demand or expected fees that are going to be paid to the hub, is that going to grow more than the 7 to 20% inflation schedule of the atom? So that's really where I'm not convinced that we're going to see a growth in the anticipated like future demand for the Cosmos hub that exceeds that growth from the inflation schedule.
Cool. And I want to start to sum this debate off. So Ben, from your point of view, what are things that you are going to be looking out for to perhaps change your mind on this?
Yeah, the biggest one is Iris, which launched recently, and Sentinel, which is another. Those are two different competing hubs that will exist in the near future. The question is, well, right now their total value of their native tokens are significantly less than Cosmos. What are the things that those teams are able to do in order to attract more demand, get more staked into the security of the network so that they are better able to compete with Cosmos? Because as we said, like Cosmos right now has a head start on everybody else. There's $250 million in the network, and over 2/3 of that is staked. So you have million. So you have $500 million staking in the security of the Cosmos hub right now. So the main things that I'll be watching are these competitors that are launching. Is like the value proposition to customers. We will offer you cheaper transactions, or we'll offer you, a different set of validators. Is there going to be demand for that? Now, with that said, I'm not necessarily just watching it over the next month or 2 months, because again, I think this really comes into play once the Cosmos hub is at its like capacity for transactions per second, and you're going to see either an increase in the fee paid per transaction that gets validated through the hub, or you're just going to see people waiting to have their transactions approved. So that's the point in time where I'm really going to look and say, is there an interest in a second or a third level quality validator set, or do people really just want to conduct through the hub no matter what the cost or time is?
Makes sense. Zaki, when do you think we'll reach that capacity? What, like, is it 2 years, 5 years, so that we can all be on the lookout?
So my point of view, well, okay. So at what point will we really start? Will the hub validator set really start extracting fees? I think, like I said, I think what'll be the key metric is going to be less the total number of transactions and more the margin that you are capable of earning by holding your assets in the Cosmos hub, because you're able to actually do something productive with them. And I think that'll be the key moment when that margin becomes not, gets into like a couple of percent a year, and the hub validator set starts thinking about, oh, can we take a quarter of this as revenue, and then the question will be, well, okay, will there be a competing validator set that does it at and I'm sure there will, and then the question is, will the assets move?
Cool. And what do you say, like 2 years, 5 years? How far are we away from that?
I think we're in the under 2 years, because I think that we already have seen some really successful patterns on Ethereum of decentral, open finance DeFi stuff, and it is going to be pretty exciting to start seeing that stuff crop up in the IBC network.
Cool. So I think it'll be an interesting thing to actually revisit this topic probably in another year or two and kind of see where we are, because I think a lot of investors are sitting on the sidelines with Cosmos and waiting to see what happens. Personally, I know that my investor network has been saying the same thing. They think from a developer point of view, it's a really cool SDK to build on, but from an investor hat, they're looking at this and wondering some of the same questions that Ben had. So it'll be an interesting thing to watch.
Like I said, it's a very, very different value accrual model than what we've ever than I think any other cryptocurrency has tried or crypto asset has tried. And it's definitely sort of like very authentically sovereign and decentralized, and an experiment that is playing out in real time every single day.
Yeah, makes sense. We had one audience question that I want to close off with. It comes from William, and he said, Twitter and Facebook are social media companies that both experience explosive growth in the past decade. If the ecosystem continues to grow, why is it mutually exclusive for demand for atoms and a competitor to both increase? I think this is for Ben.
So ultimately, it's not about the difference is like the value capture models for social networks like Facebook and Twitter are totally separate from this situation. So when you're talking about like a social network, and those companies are primarily data companies, that's how they're valued. We're really talking about something separate from in this ecosystem. Zaki and I both agree, like the primary, shorter term driver before we get to the massive AUM stuff, the shorter term driver to hold atoms is you get all of the fees and you get to govern the network. So ultimately, like the thing to look at is not, oh, both of these hubs can grow over time and that's going to be great. We really do need to look at what is the anticipated revenue that you're going to get from fees from validating in the hub or from validating in a competing hub. So I just don't think it's apples to apples in this case. But with that said, there's absolutely, and I actually think we will see that short term, really, and maybe even in the long term, the continued massive growth of the hub, other competing validator sets. It's really just a question of, especially when you introduce a really high level of inflation, right? That isn't going to stop in 10 years. So in 10 years, we may cap out at a certain TPS or like a TPS that is the Cosmos Hub decides is efficient, right? Even we can make a trade-off. We can increase as the consensus algorithm improves. We can increase the number of validators and increase the security here, or we can keep the number of validators the same and we can increase the transactions per second. And so when you have those type of trade-offs, I think in practice, the hub really is going to be limited by the number of transactions that can be processed through the hub. And as soon as you have a limit, like the demand is either going to go past that limit and you're going to see people paying a premium, at which point I think you have competitors rising up, or not, in which case there was never any demand for the Cosmos Hub anyways, and then the atoms are not going to accrue value. So the real thing comes into play when you have a cap on the TPS over time. At some point that is going to really become capped, and you still have a 10 or 20% inflation schedule every year. Well, that means that now the average fee, if your transactions per second are basically constant, the average fee is going to need to increase year over year greater than the inflation schedule. So when we talk about really the long term here, and you get past the short term growth in the Cosmos Hub and potentially other competing validator nodes, that's when that high level of inflation really comes back to bite you.
Cool. I think that's a good place to end it. Thanks for joining us, Ben and Zaki, and we'll continue the conversation in the app as well as on Twitter. You did awesome. And
thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
Thank you for having so much.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Learning so much about this thing that I've been working on. It was really great discussing with you.
It's been my pleasure. And hopefully we can revisit in some time and see where everyone stood.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Have a good one.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye.